and today is a very special and a historical day for me. Why? Because it's the launch of our new show, From Fear to Fearless. This show's idea has been in my mind for a very long time because I want to make fear normal. This show is all about sharing stories of ordinary people who have done and continue to do extraordinary things in spite of their fear. Fear is a normal part of growth and change, but for many of us, especially for children, fear becomes a factor and we have hard time pushing past our fear. Our mission for this show is to share stories of others who have pushed past their fear and done some amazing things. This show is for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or anyone who works with children or other parents. I hope the stories we share will ignite and inspire you to share it with kids in your life. I hope these stories will influence and impact their relationship with fear. I hope these conversations will excite kids and parents to take action even if fear is present. In case you missed this live show, you can listen to our podcast or watch it at fearlesslearners.live. Now, let me introduce you to our first guest to this show, no other than Dr. Gina Riley. Dr. Gina Riley is a PhD, is an educational psychologist, clinical professor, and program director of adolescent special education program at Hunter College. Dr. Riley is a seasoned academic with many years of teaching, research, and supervisory experience within the fields of special education, psychology, school psychology, and mental health counseling. In addition, Dr. Riley has over 25 years of experience in the field of online, hybrid, and high flex teaching and learning. She is known internationally for her work in the fields of homeschooling, unschooling, and self directed, intrinsically motivated learning. Her book her books include Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom, and the Homeschooling Starter Guide. Welcome, and I'm so excited to have you as my first guest. Thank you so much for being here. 5 years experience in the field of online, hybrid, and high flex teaching and learning. She is known internationally for her work in the field of homeschooling, unschooling, and self directed, intrinsically motivated learning. Her books include Unschooling, Exploring Beyond, Learning Beyond the Classroom. Let me say that again. Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom, and the Homeschooling Starter Guide. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you as our first guest to the show.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on your first episode. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a show that is all about showcasing people like yourself who have done things despite fear and went from fear to fearless. Now, fear is not a factor for you now, but when you were a 20-year-old single mother, when you decided to do things differently, to go from attachment parenting to unschooling, this was definitely was going to stir some varied opinions from your friends, neighbors, and even family. So tell me, why did you want it to go against the norm?
Sure. So, first of all, I think I'm still afraid, and I actually don't think that fear is a bad thing, right? I think fear can always propel you into something new. I always tell my students, like before a first class, I'm always afraid. I've done this forever, like I've taught forever, and I am always afraid. But again, I think fear has its purpose. So, yes. So, I was a 20-year-old single parent. It felt like ages ago, very new, right? Like you have this baby, you're like, oh my goodness. I chose to attachment parent my child, which was different than other people in this world. And then it was very different, right? I would have my child on my back, or I'd have my child in the snuggly. And, now it's very, very normal. And in 1996, it totally wasn't. So people were definitely questioning choices in terms of the way that I parented, as well as the schooling choice that I made for my child. So later on, when my child was about to enter kindergarten and everyone was so excited about the bus coming and him climbing on the bus for the first time to go to kindergarten, I chose to homeschool my child. And what we really did was unschool. I just saw his curiosity and his intrinsic motivation shining through. And I didn't want to ruin it at that time by sending him to school, which was just not a great fit for him, right? I'm never like anti-school. I always think there are so many choices in terms of learning and education. I teach teachers at my job every single day, and I honor the work that teachers do. But for us, homeschooling and unschooling was the right choice, even though it was very different from what everybody else expected us to do. It was also a very brave choice, right? Because here I am, I'm 25 years old. People are questioning me anyway. I'm like, yeah, no, my son's not going to school this year. And we kind of only said, okay, like maybe just this year. But every year we really had a lot of fun together. He was learning so much. There was really no reason to stop. And so we didn't. It was a choice every single year. Like I would ask him, hey, like, do you want to go to school? Do you want to do this? Do you want? And he would choose homeschooling and unschooling every time. So we stayed with the choice. I was afraid every year. There was a ton of fear. His first day of school was his first day of college, if you can believe that. There was a ton of fear there, but again, he was fine. Like everything was fine. And so
I want to touch on something very important you said when you started talking about this. It's about you did it with fear. Isn't that the truth, right?
I do everything with fear. I tend to be a fearful, anxious person. I might not show it on the outside, but I'm certainly that on the inside. I care deeply about other people's perspectives and opinions. I'm always scared of going against the grain. And then if you look at the trajectory of my life, it doesn't seem that way because I've always made these very alternative decisions. But yeah, every time I was afraid and I pulled through and got the courage to just move forward in what my heart and my soul believed. And it worked out well. I'm so thrilled that it worked out well.
Yes, amazing. I know your son is doing really well. So that was the great choice for him, right? It's always what fits your child. Everyone's
Exactly.
different, right?
Exactly.
So let's go back to you being this 20-year-old mom, going through this, thinking and when did this fear start happening? Like, how did it start?
Yeah. So I mean, raising a child in and of itself, I think takes great bravery and courage, right? And raising a child alone takes great bravery and courage. And so it was just a matter of making the choices that were right for him at the time before he could make choices for himself. And then when he could make choices for himself, really centering him in decisions and discussions, which I think in and of itself is a brave decision. So many times as parents, it's so much easier for us to make decisions for our kids. But when we include our kids in those decisions, there's a different outcome, right? Like there's another person's opinion to be respected and thought about and talked with. So, yeah, I mean, it has been a journey of fear, but also great courage and decisions and choices.
And I love that how you said you included him.
Yes, always. I mean, I think as soon as he could talk and verbalize, and probably even before, it was him and I against the world, right? Like we had to do what we had to do to survive. And I always wanted him to have a voice and a say in that. Because after all, that's his life, right? Like, it's not only my life and our life, but it's also his life. And I think even through adolescence, right, it was really important for me to remember that. So when we would have these discussions about things and I'd be like, oh, right. It was really important for me to remember that he is making choices for his life, and that the more decisions and choices he makes, the better he gets at them. And I could say, like, now he's an editor, he works for a
Mhm.
company in New York City. I mean, he's like a business person, right? He owns his own music education business. He makes really great choices and decisions. He's just an excellent human being. And I hope it's because he got practice with that right early on.
Of course, yeah, we need that's where you practice, where it's safe with
Yep.
your parents, right? So I
Yeah.
want to touch on what was that exact fear you had when you did say, okay, let me do this. I'm not going to put him on a bus. My
Yeah.
son
I
is well home. What was the fear? Like, what was the coming up for you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I literally thought, like, if I didn't do this well, people were gonna take my child away from me.
Mm.
Um, Again, you have a single mother, right? Let me I'll set the stage. You have a single mother, right? At the time, I just had gotten my bachelor's. I was working on my master's when he was 5. And now all of a sudden, I'm making this very untraditional decision to not send him to school. And I think it was okay the first year because kindergarten is not mandated in New York State. And everyone was like, well, he's little, they thought I would just grow out of it, or that he would be like, yeah, I want to go on that bus. And then first grade came and second grade came, and we kept making that decision together, right? That, like, oh, yeah, we can do another type. So I think there was fear of someone taking away my child and thinking that there was some sort of like educational neglect going on, even though I knew that there was, like, we were learning every day, right? And I was learning with him and we were growing, but I was scared. I was really scared.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second thing is, right, we always talk about time, career, and income effects when we talk about both single parenting and homeschooling. Listen, I was a single mother homeschooling. I had to make a living. I had to do something where I could stay home. Actually, online education in 1999 existed. So I actually did a ton of online teaching in 1999 when no one knew, right? It was a thing. And so that's how we sustained ourselves while I was also getting my master's. So there was that, fear that I wasn't making the decisions that I should as a parent, but there was also the fear of financial decisions. There was also
Mhm.
that fear of making a decision that was not great for him as a person, making a poor parenting decision. Um, I sometimes call our time unschooling a great educational experiment, and it
Mhm.
really was, right? Um, but it turned out really, really well again. Um, and I'm really proud of that time. It was probably the best time in my whole life, right? Like, I commonly, like, when we talk together now, it was like, oh, remember when we just used to literally play Legos all day? And remember when we used to just hike and think we were going to do the Appalachian Trail. So it's those memories that really sustain
Mhm.
me and
Mhm.
know that I made the right choice, and gives me
Mhm.
courage to do things in my professional life that maybe I wouldn't have done.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. But since then, you have overcome all of the fear that surrounded it, right? You have, as you told us, your son is doing amazing and you found him the best environment that worked for him and for yourself. So, how are you helping others overcome now?
So my hope is, right, I have a very unique position. For the majority of my day, I teach New York City school teachers. I really believe in public education. I really believe in my teachers. I love the students in my program so, so much, and I want the best program for them. On the other side, I do a lot of research on homeschooling and unschooling and self directed learning. And I think in that sense, right, um, my first hope is that I help people through that research. I
Mhm.
help to legitimize choices that maybe they're scared to make, right? A lot of people are saying, the more research, the less fear we feel about homeschooling and unschooling and self-directed learning. And so my whole research trajectory is just to put out that research to help others. I also do consulting on the side just to have others let go of their fear, right? Because I often say, my gosh, right? I could have just had fun all day. I didn't need to have so much fear and anxiety in me while I was unschooling or homeschooling. Um, so I help others through that consulting and coaching, but really I help others through research. I also help by being a voice, maybe a voice on alternative education, but someone who also works within the traditional realm. I know what a New York City school classroom looks like. I know how hard my teachers work all day. Again, there's a whole myriad of choices in terms of education, and people need to make the choice that works for them, right? So there's never any judgment, and I can see every choice. I can see why you would put your child in public school. I could see why you would choose a charter or a private school. I could see why you would choose a self-directed learning center or homeschooling or unschooling. I see the vision of all of it. So really, I just want to help assist people make the best decisions they can about education and about teaching and learning. And I also want to really focus on having students and having my teachers, my students, right, focus on intrinsic motivation in learning because they love it and because they're passionate about it and because they want to, right, and not learning for the grade or the assessment or the money, right, just doing it because they want to and they love it. So I hope I'm a voice in that aspect as well.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to touch on the book you wrote for, homeschooling starter guide. That was a book you wrote since the pandemic. We know that the numbers of homeschoolers have gone up. So you put that book right on that timeline to help others. So you always know how it feels like, right? Because you've gone through with your son, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I wasn't expecting Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom or the Homeschooling Starter Guide to come out during the pandemic. In both books, I wrote them before the pandemic, right? So I just happened to be lucky in terms of the time that they came out. It was always on my list, right, to write a book. I'm so proud of Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom. It was my first book. It's something I'm really passionate about. I got to talk about my research like it was a dream. It was the best thing ever, even though it's an academic book and no one reads academic books, and I know that, right? The second book, The Homeschooling Starter Guide, was a dream as well. Like when I was homeschooling as a young mother, I wrote the book I needed, right? So I always wanted to write a book about homeschooling. The opportunity kind of fell on my lap. I was so excited to do it. It was a different kind of writing for me. It was definitely more mainstream and mass published writing. But again, I'm so pleased how it turned out. And I'm thrilled about Carla Ricci and I's Self-Determined Learning, The Joys of Self-Determined Learning, which people can get. It's super accessible. It's like 99 cents on Kindle. But people can read the essays of amazing people who really focus on intrinsic motivation and learning, whether it's in a homeschool or a school or a self-directed learning center. There are some beautiful stories in that book.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, that was lucky.
Yeah, so yeah. People were like, how did that happen? Right. And I was like, no, it was total, right? Total happenstance. It was not planned that way.
Wonderfully done. So I want to ask you, one of the things that parents think is like they go from, because you have experience in all parts, like you just said, even if you want to put your child in a traditional school, it's okay if that works for them and for that child, right? So one of the things when we did our summit during the COVID 2020, you told me that there's a period between, whatever you want to do between taking the child out to taking them to unschooling or homeschooling. There's a period called deschooling, which was, I think, a lot of parents miss, right?
Yeah, deschooling is such an interesting topic. I am writing and just finishing, actually, this week has been my writing week. And I am writing a study on unschooling students with disabilities.
Mm.
And one of the things that come up in every unschooling study I do, including this unschooling students with disability study, is this concept of deschooling, or parents and kids really having to get like ingrained thoughts about what school is and what they should be doing during the day out of their heads so that they can really choose and enter a learning environment that works for them. So usually deschooling, de-schooling happens when someone moves their child from like a public school or a private school to a homeschool or a more self-directed learning center with more freedom. Because, self-directed, self-determined learning, there's a lot more autonomy there. There's a lot more freedom there. And it is an adjustment. School is amazing. If you like a schedule and you like to know like when your periods start and what you're studying when, and, if you like people telling you when to do this and that, I mean, school definitely has its purpose. If you love extrinsic rewards and need those grades, like that's important, right? And that's very important to some people. And then the other side or other choices are more self-directed. So deschooling is really the shift from a more formal public or private school to a more self-determined or self-directed learning environment. And it is a shift, and it takes time, and it takes space, and it takes rest, right? And so when you see your kid who was in school just hanging out on the sofa and maybe playing video games, or maybe just reading all day or drawing all day, and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is working, give it time. It does take time to adjust from one specific environment to another. And it takes us time as adults to take away those deeply ingrained thoughts we have about schooling and learning and achievement.
Yeah. And that's the period of when the fear comes.
Yep,
And
that is
right.
the fear period. Yes, you should you should write that one down, because that really is, the deschooling period is scary,
Yeah.
right? Any period of rest before a creative burst, or before some sort of, I call it like the rainbow, whatever you want to call it, any period of rest is scary, because when we rest, we think, right? And all of our fears and all of our dreams come colliding into each other. It's a hard time sometimes for the body. It's also a hard time for the mind. So, periods of rest are wonderful and needed, but they can also be very confusing and very anxious.
Mhm. And how would you tell a parent to handle that situation? Because sometimes when you are fearful as a parent, your child can feel it very easily because they read off of your energy and your body language, right? So, how
Yeah.
do you stay calm and cool when you're like, am I doing the right thing doing this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think like daily rhythms help, right? Having a daily rhythm where you wake up and you do a certain thing, and then maybe mid-afternoon you take a walk with the dog together, just take the walk, or and then in the evening have a rhythm to your day, so it doesn't feel like right, like what do we do here? I think also talking about fear is really healthy, right? Like we're not supposed to put a smile on my face and say, we are not afraid. Everyone's going to be strong and happy, and we're just going to be like thrilled right now. We really should be talking to our kids about the feelings and emotions that we're feeling so that they can share their feelings and emotions. And sometimes those conversations, right? Like we want them to be structured, but sometimes they just happen on a walk, or they just happen on the couch, or they just happen, just when we're doing, like when we're cooking together, and just sort of waiting for those times, like not expecting anything, not like having a huge conversation, but waiting for those, like what I call connection times.
Mhm.
so that we can talk about our experiences. And it doesn't have to be heavy, right? I tell my son all the time now, and he's a full grown adult. I'm like, I am so scared. And he'll tell me, like, Mom, you are always scared. And me too, right? We just cover it up well. But we have those kinds of discussions. And I think that's really healthy. It's really healthy to be able to verbalize emotions.
Yeah, and fear is part of growth. Yeah.
100%. I always think fear is like that thing that happens before you're just gonna like grow big, right? Like it's all that fear, 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 and then you just do the thing, and it's like poof,
Yeah.
right? And I'll give you an example. I had the opportunity this summer for the very first time to go to Prague alone. Uh,
Mhm.
to visit a place where they were teaching economics, which is so out of my league and out of my realm. I had to leave my family, and I had all that fear about like leaving my dog. And oh my gosh, I was going on a plane, which I hadn't been on in forever.
Mm.
Right. So, like, up to that point, like, I'm not going to lie, there was a ton of fear and emotion, and oh my gosh. And then I got on that plane, like, whatever, 18 hours, right? I'm afraid the whole time. And then you end up in this beautiful place. And it's like, right, like I would have never had that experience had it not been for specific people, had it not been for me saying, yes, I can do this, even though I haven't been on a plane in 10 years. So sometimes you've just got to like live within the fear, and then that big, beautiful thing happens, that dream happens.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now I have a. This is one of my favorite questions to ask everyone that I'm going to be asking is, what would you imagine if you were a younger self, and what would you tell your younger self about fear?
Yeah, I always think about this. Um, I would definitely tell my younger self that the anxiety and the tears and the fear, sometimes it's a lot of wasted time, right? I could have been feeling joy in that space. I could have been, instead of being like afraid of what's going to happen in the future, I could have been playing with my kid joyfully. It was a big lesson in learning how to be in the present. And yes, fear and anxiety are a part of that. But also just really, sometimes the best antidote to anxiousness is like happiness, right? I think if there's like anxiousness and fear, and then on the other side, there's happiness, they can exist together. So I wish that I spent more time not being afraid and being courageous than I spent in fear. That being said, again, fear is what makes the magic happen sometimes.
Yeah, we need it. We need it.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Is you talked about intrinsic motivation with student, which is one of your favorite sub topic. For parents who are listening, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So intrinsic motivation is the joy and the energy and the excitement you feel when doing something you love.
Mm.
It is the opposite of extrinsic motivation, which would be doing something for the grade, for the money, because someone told us to, right? And when we talk about, or when I talk about intrinsic motivation, I always talk of it in terms of Dichi and Ryan's self-determination theory, which is a theory that defines intrinsic motivation. I also love the cognitive evaluation theory, which is like a sub theory of self determination theory. And that theory talks about ways that we, as teachers, as parents, can facilitate intrinsic motivation in others,
Mhm.
because we can't force it, right? We have to facilitate it. And we can do this by three things. And the first thing is competence, creating a sense of competence in our environment, right? For me, for teachers, for parents, that might mean focusing on a child's strengths, um, giving that positive specific praise to a kid, right? And saying, oh my gosh, like your handwriting is so good. Again, I'm not saying good job. I'm saying, look at that handwriting. That's amazing,
Mhm.
right? I often get this like, praise is extrinsic. Yeah, but positive specific praise is different, right? It's like way more intrinsic. And also by just providing experiences or facilitating experiences in which kids feel competence, in which they can say, I am good at this, right? And we know when a kid can say, I am good at this, whatever it is, that's the most amazing feeling in the world. And if they're good at that, then they can be good at other things too, right? So competence is really important. Um, the second part of facilitation of intrinsic motivation is giving students a sense of autonomy or a sense of freedom and choice. It's harder in a public school environment, definitely not impossible, but harder, and more possible in more self-directed environments. But freedom and autonomy, like in a school, might mean utilizing choice texts or as a math teacher, right, giving students like 10 questions and saying, choose 5 or choose 3. It might look like having students choose the way they do a final project. And then on the other side, in a more self-directed side, once we get used to those small feelings of choice and autonomy and freedom, we can make bigger choices about how we utilize our time, about what classes we might want to take or what we might want to learn from YouTube or Skillshare or wherever, right? And then ultimate freedom is just sort of like this unschooling point of view where you kind of get to design your day just like adults get to design their days and their lives. So there's that freedom and autonomy perspective that's really important. And then the last thing is relatedness, right? The importance of having one person who unconditionally loves and accepts you no matter what. And that's sometimes hard, right? It's easy to say, but it's really hard to unconditionally love and accept a person no matter what. No matter if you make mistakes, no matter if I think you made a stupid decision, no matter if, right, it gets scarier and scarier. But that relatedness is really important because it allows the person to feel like they can make their own intrinsically motivated decisions because someone will accept them no matter what decision they make, and that they have the freedom and choice to make that decision.
Beautiful, beautiful. Grounding, grounding. We
Yeah,
all need it.
very grounding.
Thank you so much for that answer. That is so beautifully said. You know, Gina, as always, I always have a beautiful conversation with you. You have so much to share. So thank you for being who you are and how you overcame your fear and sharing that wealth of knowledge with others. And I love always your passion and learning and helping parents. You know, they need help. We're in a very important era of life where parenting is one of the hardest things because we're given things that our parents never dealt with. So thank you for being who you are.
Thank you so much, and same to you. You do amazing things, and so much appreciation to what you give to the world, truly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So to connect with Gina, you can visit her website at ginarileyphd.com. So thank you, Gina, for being here. So thank you, everyone, for tuning into our show today. We will go live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. If you're interested in making learning easy for your child, please book a Clarity coaching call at fearlesslearners.com. Click the green button below this video. It'll take you directly to book a call with one of our certified learning success coaches. Until next time, see what's on the other side of fear. Let's ignite and inspire children to push past their fear and make fear not a factor for them. Let's help our children learn and grow fearless. Let's influence them and impact them to see unlimited possibilities. Like I always like to say, fear plus less equals fearless learners. Thank you, and I'll see you next time on Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. Thank you so much.